What if Johann Liebert met Jesus Christ? When the emptiness he chose meets the one who is. Johann Liebert never needed to scream, never needed to threaten, never needed to hate. Hate requires a bond. Johann operated without any bond at all. He was the silence between human decisions, the interval where consciousness loses weight. He sought neither power, nor pleasure, nor recognition. He sought confirmation. The confirmation that nothing was missed, that no life was indispensable, that the world could be erased without the universe noticing. He did not kill out of impulse, did not destroy out of trauma, did not react to pain. He observed. He learned early that human beings carry within them an essential fragility, the secret desire to disappear. Johann simply pointed the way, a well-placed whisper, a right idea in the wrong mind, and the whole building collapsed. Not through violence, by choice. What made Johann terrifying was not his cruelty, it was his lucidity. He did not see himself as a villain. He saw himself as a logical consequence. If the world is a mistake, then disappearing is coherent. If there is no center, then any center is a lie. If nothing has absolute value, then existence is optional. Johann believed this with the calmness of someone who never needed to justify. There was no internal conflict. There was no moral struggle. There was only a stable, clean, elegant absence. Where other monsters screamed their pain, Johann offered silence. Where others begged for meaning, he offered nothing. And yet, there was something that bothered him. Not people, not deaths, not pursuits. What disturbed him was the human insistence on pretending that life mattered. Promises, loves, families, God. All of it seemed to him like a poorly rehearsed play, a theater to endure chance. That night, he walked aimlessly, as always. He wasn't fleeing. He wasn't searching. He simply existed, if that was still the right word. The space around him felt too neutral, too clean, as if it had been emptied of intentions. Johann liked that. Environments like that revealed what remains when everything is taken away. Then something happened. It wasn't fear. It wasn't alertness. It was density. A presence occupied the space without pressing it. It didn't compete. It didn't impose. It didn't explain. It was just there, whole, as if reality itself had decided to remain in human form. Johann stopped. In front of him stood an ordinary-looking man. Simple clothes, serene gaze, no weapon, no hurry, no defense. Nothing about him seemed extraordinary, and yet nothing about him was disposable. Johann observed with clinical attention. "You don't seem lost," he said, in the soft voice of someone who doesn't provoke. "I came to find you," the man replied. The phrase contained neither urgency nor judgment. It was factual. Johann slightly tilted his head, curious. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes." "And yet you decided to approach?" "Yes." Johann smiled, a small, almost polite smile. "People usually run away when they understand me." "I didn't come to run away." The word "see" appeared in Johann's mind even before it was spoken. "There's nothing to see," he said. "I am just the space between things." "You are a life," the man replied. "No," Johann calmly corrected. "I am proof that life is optional." The man did not react. He did not argue. He did not correct. He just kept looking, as if listening to something serious, without the need to interrupt. "You believe that emptiness is more honest than love," he said. "Love lies," Johann replied. "It promises meaning where there is none. It creates narratives to endure chance. I simply remove the illusion. And when the illusion falls, what remains?" "Nothing," Johann said, "and that is freedom." There was silence. Not an awkward silence, a heavy silence, as if something was being measured beyond words. "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 32. Johann let out a brief laugh. "I know the truth, and it is simple. No one is missed." You confuse absence of attachment with truth, the man replied, and you call what is resignation freedom. Resigning is lucid, Johan said. Waiting is cruel. Waiting without love is cruelty, the man replied. But love does not disappoint. Letter to the Romans, chapter 5, verse 5. Johan felt something rare cross his logic. Not emotion, not guilt, a misalignment. As if someone was speaking from an axis he did not recognize, but could not simply dismiss. Do you really believe that every life has value? Johan asked. Yes. Even those who wish not to exist? Especially those. Even those who destroy other lives? I came to seek and save what was lost. Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, verse 10. Johan remained silent. For the first time, someone spoke to him without trying to explain him, without reducing him to trauma, without offering a psychological diagnosis. That man did not treat him as a phenomenon. He treated him as someone who existed. You speak of salvation as if it were desirable, Johan said, but I do not wish to be saved. I know, the man replied. Still, I came. Why? Because you exist. The phrase was not an argument. It was a foundation, and it struck something deep. For Johan, existing had never been reason enough. It had always been an accident. But there, someone treated his existence as a reason in itself. If I do not want to change, Johan said, would you still stay? Love is patient. First letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13, verse 4. And if I continue proving that everything is empty, I will continue being life. The Gospel of John, chapter 14, verse 6. The contrast was absolute. Johan operated by the denial of meaning. That man presented himself as embodied meaning, not as an idea, as presence. You don't hate me, Johan stated. No. You don't fear me. No. You don't try to stop me. No. Then what are you doing here? Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Revelation, chapter 3, verse 20. Johan understood, not as an emotional invitation, as a respected limit. The door would not be broken down, the void would not be violated, but the presence would not be withdrawn. And what if I never open? I will remain. And at that moment, something broke. Not in Johan, but in the logic that sustained him. For the first time, the void was not sovereign. It had been seen, named, confronted, and it was not accepted as a final destiny. The silence that followed was not empty. It was confrontation. Johan remained still, looking at the space where that man was still standing. He had not moved away. He had not turned his back. He had not withdrawn as someone who loses interest. He simply remained there, like a presence that does not tire, that does not demand a reaction, that does not validate itself by the response of the other. That was intolerable for Johan. The world had always worked for him in a simple way. Everything that exists reacts. Everything that exists desires something. Everything that exists can be pushed, manipulated, led to the point where its very existence becomes unbearable. But that presence did not react. It did not plead. It did not justify itself. It did not need to win. You don't understand, said Johan, breaking the silence with the same calm as always. I do not suffer. I do not lament. I carry no guilt. I do not need to be saved. The man replied without raising his voice, without correcting the tone. Whoever does not love remains in death. First letter of John, chapter 3, verse 14. Johan frowned slightly, not out of disagreement, but for precision. That sentence did not attack him. It described him. Death does not scare me, he said. It is honest. Death is an enemy, the man replied, and I came to conquer it. First Epistle to the Corinthians, chapter 15, verse 26. Johan observed in silence. Conquering death did not seem to him a grand promise. It seemed a contradiction. Everything died. Everything disappeared. Everything dissolved. He had seen this too early and understood it too early. The world did not need salvation. It only needed to accept the end. "You call an enemy that which gives rest," Johan said. "The end is merciful." "The end without love is abandonment," the man replied. Johan tilted his head. "You insist on valuing what has none," he said. "That is dangerous. That is exactly what saves." The dialogue did not progress as a dispute. It was as if two realities touched without mixing. Johan represented lucid resignation. Jesus represented loving insistence. There was no possible middle ground. "Tell me," Johan asked, "if I disappear now, what changes?" "The world will lose someone who exists," the man replied. "But no one will miss me." Value does not arise from the felt absence, but from the fact of having been created. Johan felt something strange move within him. Not emotion, not regret, a conceptual fissure. He had always believed that value came from recognition, from impact, from memory, from utility. The idea of inherent value seemed childish to him, and yet impossible to refute without destroying the entire notion of human dignity. "You speak as if someone wanted me here. Before you existed, I knew you." Book of the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 5. The phrase fell heavily. Johan never saw himself as desired. He never saw himself as called. He always saw himself as a consequence, an accident, a remainder, noise. That statement offered no comfort. It offered origin, and origin was something he had never considered. "What if I reject this?" he asked, almost as a test. "If I say I don't want this value?" "I respect your choice," the man replied. "But that doesn't change who you are to me." Johan felt the discomfort grow. He could accept being hated. He could accept being fought against. He could accept being eliminated. But he didn't know how to deal with a love that didn't depend on his response. "You leave me no option," he said. "I leave you all," the man replied, "including the option to reject me." "Then why stay?" "Because love does not abandon." John 13:1. Johan took a deep breath. For the first time, the absence he called freedom began to feel too narrow. Not because it was wrong, but because it was too empty to sustain everything he denied. "You know," Johan said, "that I will continue to be who I am." "I know. I will continue to prove that nothing is missing." "I know. I will continue walking towards nothing." "I know. And yet, you stay." "Yes." Silence returned to settle in. But now it was not a comfortable silence. It was a silence that demanded a response, not in words, but in inner positioning. "You are dangerous," Johan finally said. "Not because you impose, but because you insist." The man replied in a firm and calm voice. "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." John 1:5. There was no visible transformation. There were no tears. There was no dramatic conversion. Johan remained there, whole, intact, lucid. The emptiness still existed. But now he knew something that could not be erased. The emptiness had been seen, and it was not accepted as a final destination. The presence began to withdraw, not as one who gives up, but as one who trusts in time. There was no promise of return, just the certainty that the door remained there. Johan was alone again, but something had changed, not in his decision, but in his sovereignty. Because now he knew that his refusal did not nullify the value of existence, it only postponed it. And this is where the story ceases to be about Johan Liebert. Perhaps you do not destroy lives. Perhaps you do not lead people to the abyss. But perhaps there exists in you a silent weariness, an elegant resignation, a discreet desire not to exist fully. Perhaps you have learned to function, to follow, to survive, but not to live. The gospel does not impose meaning. He offers it to you, not as an obligation, but as a presence. Jesus does not shout against the void. He stands before it. And perhaps the question today is not whether Johan could change, Perhaps it is whether you are willing to admit that giving up is not freedom. I came that they may have life. Gospel of John, chapter 10, verse 10. That promise does not require you to feel anything. It simply affirms that you matter. If this story spoke to you, do not ignore it. Perhaps it is not entertainment. Perhaps it is a calling. If you want to respond today, write in the comments, "I choose to exist." Subscribe to the channel for more stories that confront the void with truth. Share with someone who is living in silence. Because the love that is called life does not abandon, not even when you try to disappear. He offers it to you, not as an obligation, but as a presence. Jesus does not shout against the void. He stands before it. And perhaps the question today is not whether Johan could change. Perhaps it is whether you are willing to admit that giving up is not freedom. I came that they may have life. Gospel of John, chapter 10, verse 10. That promise does not require you to feel anything. It simply affirms that you matter. If this story spoke to you, do not ignore it. Perhaps it is not entertainment. Perhaps it is a calling. If you want to respond today, write in the comments, "I choose to exist." Subscribe to the channel for more stories that confront the void with truth. Share with someone who is living in silence. Because the love that is called life does not abandon, not even when you try to disappear.